much, Brian, for joining me today. I'm going to start off with the stuff, just get it out of the way. 2014 World Horror Grandmaster Award, 2 Bram Stoker Awards, writing for The X-Files, which personally I cheered up and down and geeked out for a minute. Some Marvel and DC work too. I mean, work option for movies on Chiller, Fast Zombies. What is it? Fast Zombies Suck? I think I saw that one actually.
Yeah.
You did the horror show podcast as well as Defenders Dialogue. I mean, a web series, dude, you're everywhere. I just, how do we keep up? How do you feel just being, do you split yourself in half or what? I mean, how are you doing that?
You know, you and I were talking before we started broadcasting. We've known each other over 20 years. And I got to tell you, it was a lot easier back in the day than it is now. You know, but my dear friend, he calls me his mentor. I don't see myself as his mentor. I see him as my equal, Gabino Iglesias.
Sure.
You know, he says you've always got to hustle, and it's true. You know, he's a young writer, and he's hustling. You know, I'm 53. I'm still hustling. I look at somebody who I see as a mentor, like Joe R. Lansdale. You know, Joe's got 20 years on me. He's still hustling. He's able to slow down and decide what he wants to hustle on these days, but he's still hustling.
Right.
It's, you know, it's just, it's that work ethic. I think I probably got it from my father. He was a blue collar guy. He worked 7 days a week, shift work in a paper mill. And, you know, while writing is not the same type of job, I think I picked that work ethic up from him. And I'm just, you know, I'm always working every day. And that's how I juggle all that.
It's funny. So you think that the horror genre would be just because there's so many of us, but Gabino taught me in my MFA program. I totally know. I keep in contact with him all the time, you know, and yes, you're right about him hustling. He is, and that's the bottom line of it though. Where do you think you get the drive from, aside from where you've pulled the work ethic from, the work itself, where are you getting all these ideas? Because it's not all the same thing.
You know, I don't know.
That's the most honest answer ever.
I mean, I was always a fan of this genre. I can distinctly remember being 8 years old and sort of discovering horror through comic books, and then through, like, you know, early Stephen King novels, F. Paul Wilson novels, and you know, early movies like Don Coscarelli's Phantasm and Jaws and things like that. But I've always been a fan. I consider myself a fan who was lucky enough to get a job working in this industry. So, you know, that love and that passion for the genre has never left me. The business, I don't always love, and I'm not always passionate about. But the genre itself, I just, you know, I love, and I never seem to run out of ideas. It's the opposite. These days, I'm running low on speed. You know, I'm still trying to hustle, but I just can't type as fast as I used to. So now it's a matter of, okay, well, which idea do I want to work on the most?
That's a good problem to have, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about it. I mean, I ran into that writer's block, and it wasn't about typing. I could have typed all day. I just couldn't get it out. So that's a really good problem to have. So
no, that's a real thing. You know, people they look in disdain at writer's block, and you know, when I'm giving the pep talk, I'll say, oh, you know, you got to push through writer's block, etc. But writer's block is a real thing. You know, I had an accident a couple years ago, which, you know, everybody can go online and read about, because, you know, it's the second time in my life I made the national news, but it wasn't for, you know, zombies. It was for nearly killing myself. But, you know, when I got out of the burn ward, I had pretty bad PTSD for about 6 months. And, you know, it was incredibly hard to write. I would make myself do it, but what I was writing was complete crap. You know, it was me trying to fight my way through writer's block, and it just wasn't working.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, then it went away. I mean, it's like one day you say, well, this is who I am. I have to sit down and be who I am. At least that's how it worked for me. I sat back down and said, okay, The part that made me stop is over. I've got to go ahead and push through. And if I can't, then I'm going to challenge who I thought I've always been.
Right.
You know. So about the stuff, about what you write. I mean, of course, we know The Rising. That kind of started it all, right? I mean, but let's, if we can, just bounce around just a little bit.
Sure.
Indeed. No, you know what? Why not? All right, let's go with it. The zombies are different than we've ever seen before, right? I thought I hated running zombies, but I now know I don't like zombies that communicate with each other. I mean, you did that. You did that. I didn't even think about that before. You did that. How in the world could you have come up with that? Because zombies are zombies. You know, they're zombies. You know what I mean? We kind of know what they do, but you changed the game.
You know what it was? It was George Romero's movie Day of the Dead.
Okay.
If you remember, that's the third one in his trilogy, and it opens. They're in Florida, I think, and they're in the town, and you see all the zombies milling about. This is like the opening sequence, and then you see this alligator on the courthouse steps. And I remember being a teenager and watching this, and I got so excited because I thought it was going to be a zombie alligator, and it wasn't.
Right.
And keep in mind, at the time, I'm still just a fan, but I get the idea right there in my head. Oh, zombie animals. If I ever write a novel, I'm going to do zombie animals. Fast forward a number of years where, I was starting as a writer. I'd published short stories. I'd published nonfiction, hadn't yet published a novel. And my oldest son, who's now 30, geez, where does time go? But
wow.
he lived in New Jersey with his mother. And I was driving through Pennsylvania on the turnpike, and they had shut the turnpike down because there was a blizzard. And the National Guard pulls me over, and they're like, "You need to get off the road, state of emergency." I'm like, "Yes, sir, I'll do that." As soon as they were out of sight, I kept going. And I thought, all right, military dudes with guns didn't stop me from seeing my son. What would? Zombies? No, but that's a cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remembered the zombie animals and the guys with the guns. I'm like, what if it was zombies with guns? And bam, the novel took off. That's where it all came from. Just these disparate ideas that had been bouncing around inside this fan's head for years. And, they finally awesome. Connected like Legos. They finally snapped together.
That's pretty awesome, though. I mean, I read the book when I didn't have kids. And so the familial connection didn't touch me as much as when I had children and then read it. And I was like, oh, of course you keep going. Nothing stops you then. The whole time I'm like, well, you're going to die. The first time I was reading it. Second time, doesn't matter if you die. It's interesting how, anything you read at different points in your life can hit you differently.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
And
we were talking before about that.
It's the flip side of that. It's interesting things you can write at a certain point in your life that you can't at others. The Rising was my first novel. I mean, I wrote it in 99, 2000. And boy, if I could go back and massage it and change it, I would. There's a lot in there I don't like now. But, the violence level, I don't know that I could capture that again now at 53. I'm a father again. I can still bring it when I need to. I think my novel, The Complex, which is a few years old, I think that's certainly super violent.
Oh, yeah.
But just the meanness of The Rising, I don't think I could do that again at this age. I'm a different person now.
I was going to bring up The Complex once you started talking that. I don't know. The Complex is raw. I love it, but it's raw.
It came from a raw place. My best friend, J.F. Gonzalez, fellow author, you knew Jesus as well. He had passed. And again, I was struggling with the writer's block. I was making myself write, but it wasn't any good. And, Mary San Giovanni, my partner, she said she could tell when I was working on The Complex because she'd hear me laugh and she'd hear my fingers move faster on the keyboard. I channeled a lot of my anger at his death into that novel. I didn't realize it at the time. But it was the most fun I've had writing something that I think ever. I've written 50 books, something like that, 300 short stories. I don't think I've ever had as much fun writing something as I did the Complex. It's brutal and violent, but it was very healing, very cathartic for me, you know?
Yeah, no, and that's good. That's what writing's supposed to be, and sometimes people don't buy that when we're writing what we write, but it's true. It's still
Right.
true.
But
I definitely enjoyed listening to it. I listened to that one.
I look at The Rising and the Complex, and I love the characters in The Rising. Frankie will always be my favorite character I've ever created. I love her to death. I want her to come to life.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I look at the characters in that book versus the characters in the Complex, and it's easy to see. All right, yeah, that's the work of a young guy who doesn't understand human beings yet. This is the work of a guy who's seen the world and gotten to know people. They're night and day different.
Well, you answered one of the questions I was going to ask you about who your favorite character is. Interesting that it's Frankie. I mean, because you put her through some stuff.
Frankie, I'm still putting her through stuff.
Yeah, I mean, she still survives to be able to fight. The whole fight another day thing definitely exists in her. Why is she your favorite, though?
Part of it is, she's mostly a fictional character, but certainly like we all do as writers, we borrow from real life, and I knew a Frankie in real life. And she went through a lot of the same crap that Frankie went through. She went through addiction, but she was a fighter. She never gave up. Even at the end, she didn't give up. So part of it is that, but part of it is just, Frankie could be faced with, the ultimate evil in the universe, and she's still got a one-liner for it. She may be scared, but she's not gonna let it know she's scared,
That's right.
And that speaks to me.
I love that. Definitely true.
But yeah, Frankie and Tony Genova, my mob enforcer from the Clickers books and now the Labyrinth series, he would be my other favorite. A lot of my fans have said that, he's a Mary Sue for me. Mary, my own girlfriend, says, yeah, he's a Mary Sue for you. Yeah, this is you working out your stuff every time you use him. But, it's true. But, I like the guy. He tries to do well. Sometimes he makes an awful mess of things in trying to do well, but he has good intentions.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So about the Complex, we were there. So now we might as well talk about it. So you did something with this young kid. He was wearing braces, and what you did struck a chord with me, and it struck a chord with the character as well. But it had me grimacing and cringing. And how do you envision, like, you take a character that some of us, not everyone, but some of us would take pause and look at and say, okay, don't touch that one, or don't hurt that one, or don't be so brutal with that one. And that's the one you like. I don't want to give it away, but like, you eviscerate that. It's terrible. That one is the one you torture. So how do you make the decision? I know with me, it's the process is different for all of us. So how do you do that?
For me, I usually do not know that that's going to happen until it happens. Particularly in the case of the Complex, I had no outline, no plot other than, all right, there's this hugely diverse group of people living in this little apartment complex, 20 feet away from each other, but they don't know each other. And now all these crazy people are going to descend, and they're going to have to learn who each other is real quick. That was all I knew.
That's awesome.
I didn't know what the end was going to be. I didn't even know it would end up leaving the complex and going into the town. So, I don't have a good answer. My answer is, when I get to that moment, if it feels right, I trust my instincts. I trust my gut. There have been times where I didn't trust my instincts, and I find in those moments, those are the books or the scenes that seem to fall flat with readers. They don't seem to connect. So, I've been doing this 25 years now. I've learned to trust my instincts. That's where the plot wants to go. That's where we're going to go.
Right. No, and as a pantser, I'm always like that. I don't write any outlines. I just go where the story is going, which was part of the reason, as we talked about with my block, it was so intense because I don't know what the characters are going to do. So when they did what they were doing, I couldn't let them. So I had to stop writing. But for you, do you always outline? You mentioned you didn't want to have one for the complex, but is that something you do generally?
Rarely. Sometimes when I'm collaborating with another author, if they're more comfortable with an outline, then sure, let's do that. Because writing is a solitary process until you collaborate.
Right.
And then you've got to be willing to give, but yeah, I rarely outline. I used to, my first few books, particularly when I was with Leisure Books, they would make me outline.
Really?
And the finished novel never ever followed the outline. It would follow it about halfway, and then instead of going that way, I'd go over here. And eventually they're like, yeah, just don't worry about the outline. Give us like a paragraph what it's about.
Yeah, really. I find them so restrictive.
I do too.
I did it when I was in school, right? I had to, but
Exactly.
After that, forget it. Oh my gosh. I don't know. I like the flexibility of just being able to write. So now, how quickly do you think you write? Now, you say you're not as fast as you used to be, but you've got 50 books, dude. So I mean, that's a lot. And 300 stories plus other stuff.
I've definitely slowed down. It used to be in my prime. Oh my God, I sound old. In my prime. I could do a full-length novel, meaning 80,000 words or more, in 4 months' time. I cannot do that anymore. An 80,000 word novel now, it's going to take me 6 to 8 months. But what I do and I've done this since early on, ever since. I don't want viewers and listeners to get the wrong impression here. Okay. Most writers have some sort of day job. They have another job. Okay. I understand how privileged I am to be doing this for a living, where this is my only job. But since I've been doing it as my only job, which I guess has been 15 years now, I work on several things each day. I start the morning working on one thing. I eat my lunch, and then in the afternoon I work on something else. And I can keep my productivity up that way. I also find that, particularly in horror, the novella seems to work better than the novel. And in today's publishing world, it's a lot easier to sell a novella than it used to be. So, instead of doing an 80,000 word novel, if the plot calls for it, I can get away with doing, 30,000, 40,000 words. Bam, there's another book done. So,
that's kind of crazy, because when we were coming up, it wasn't like that.
Oh yeah, you try to sell a 40,000 word novella back in the day, and they'd laugh at you.
Yeah, and you'd catch so much flack. It was almost like they would. You can't write a novel, so you gave me this little thing. It's not that the story ends here. This is truly what the story does.
Yeah.
No, it was never viewed that way, but I'm glad to see that it's changed.
Yep.
It's crazy. So, all right, so let's think a little bit about just character development and things like that. So often horror authors are accused of like pushing character development to the side. I mean, I'm sure you've heard that. Preferring to focus on this, whatever the scary thing is, the antagonist, whatever they've used. At the same time, there are some writers who think that the monster is where the focus really should be, and that's a deliberate thing, not that they couldn't or forgot to do the character development, but that they deliberately did not, and they're focused on the beast. But you take time to work into those characters. That's why they resonate. That's why that one kid in that complex book just bugged me so badly, really. I mean, I stopped the book for a moment. I was like, oh no. I was like, no. So you don't do that. You really flesh them out so that we care, really. I mean, we connect. Can you explain why you spend that time there?
Yeah, I don't think horror works unless you care about the characters. I understand the impact of the Friday the 13th movies on our industry and our fandom and our genre. And I understand aesthetically why they're fun to watch, but they don't scare me. They're not horror. Because I don't care about any of those characters. Jason spends every movie hacking up a bunch of surplus teenagers, and I don't know any of their names. I don't know what their dreams and hopes are. you give me, yeah, I can't think of a movie offhand, but you give me a movie where I care about the characters. I'll give you a great example. Just thought of one movie called Session 9, one of my favorite horror movies. David Caruso and a bunch of other guys. They're cleaning the asbestos out of this old asylum. And the movie takes the time to introduce us to these blue collar guys, and we learn their hopes and dreams and fears. And it makes it that much more terrifying when the movie starts taking them apart. You know, horror fans want to feel that emotion. They want to be scared. They want to be thrilled. And if you don't first give them the reason to care about the characters, then they're not going to feel those things.
Right. No, I totally agree with you. And it always surprises me when people sort of pin the other label onto horror authors. And okay, granted, some horror authors don't, you know, but many of us do. So yeah, good point.
Right. Pressure's
a big one for you.
I've
heard it compared to the Meg, right?
Yeah.
The Steve Alton series. But I want to know how do you categorize it? What do you think about that comparison? What do you think of it?
Pressure's an odd book. You know, I had declared that I would never, ever go back to a mainstream New York publisher. You know, I was very happy with my time in the mainstream, but you know, I was lucky enough and privileged enough now to be making more money as an indie author. But you know, Macmillan had this idea for the book, and they wanted to, you know, bring me in, and, you know, oh, Brian Keene returns to mainstream horror. But in going through the pitch and refining the pitch to something both they were comfortable with and I was comfortable with, it really wasn't a horror novel anymore. It was more of a, you know, a Michael Crichton science fiction thriller. You know, I'm happy with the book. I'm happy with the characters. I love the setting. But ultimately, I was not happy with the monster. I wish I could have done more with the monster. And I'm not slighting anybody at Macmillan. Okay, they had very sound, very good reasons for how they wanted the novel to play out. Because again, they weren't marketing it as horror. But you know, if I could go back and rewrite it, yeah, there'd be 85% more monster in that book.
Spoken like a true horror author, honestly.
Yeah, you know.
Your truth literally just fell out of your mouth just then. It's funny because we are who we are, right? Over the weekend, you'd laugh at this because, you know, I've been psychological horror author L. Marie Wood forever, the whole time you've known me. Over the weekend, or it was actually last weekend, I went through in my mind, I'm like, what about supernatural suspense? I kept tripping over it. Like, that's cool, but I don't know. I think I'm married to this other thing.
No, I think you should do it.
I don't know how to say it even. Supernatural suspense. I can't even get it out of my mouth.
Let me tell you a story.
Yeah.
So early in my career, for my second novel, right after The Rising. Okay, you know, The Rising comes out, they print 10,000 copies in paperback, and they think that'll last like a year. And it sells out in 2 months' time, and they're like,
fools.
So they go back to print, and you know, they go through like 4 printings in the first year. So we had a hit on our hands, and I followed it up with a crime novel for Bantam called Terminal, and it bombed. I mean, it tanked. Luckily, I had also written a sequel to The Rising, and that was it. I thought, okay, well, I'm stuck doing, you know, horror novels. And it wasn't until, I guess, 15 years later, you know, I was talking to Joe Lansdale, bring him up again. And, you know, we were talking about our shared love of Edgar Rice Burroughs, you know, Pellucidar, that world in the center of the hollow earth where it's dinosaurs, and, you know, and I said, man, I'd kill to write one of those. And, you know, Joe looks at me and he says, well, why don't you? And I said, well, I'm a horror writer. I can't do that. And he looks at me and he says, you're Brian effing Keene. I think at this point you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, basically.
And I look and it clicked. I'm like, you know what? He's right. I did. I wrote one. It's called The Lost Level. And
good for you.
I was very nervous about how my fans would embrace that because it was such a departure for me. They loved it. You know, it's now one of my most popular novels.
Oh, that's awesome.
You know, so I think you should do it. You're El Marie Wood. You can write whatever you want.
Someone suggested when I was kicking it around, they're like, oh, you know, change your name and put it out as something else. I'm like, well, no. I mean, it's me. I can't, no, not doing that. But I don't know. One day we'll talk about it again. We'll see if I can say it properly. I can't even say it, Brian. So I don't know. That's too funny. All right. So let's talk about the comic book work you've done, because you have branched out and done some different things. The Last Zombie for, what was it, Antarctic Press? And it was like 25 issues, if I remember seeing that right.
25. It was supposed to go to 50, but you know, in today's comic market, that's rare that you get to 50 issues. So we cut it off at 25, but I was able to wrap everything up. And unlike all my other comic stuff, I own all the rights to it.
Neat. Okay. And this goes back to like an interest you had when you were a kid.
Oh yeah. Cullen Bunn and I laugh all the time. Because I grew up wanting to be a comic book writer. Cullen grew up wanting to be a horror novelist. And we
crossed.
You know, Cullen is an award-winning comic book writer who occasionally moonlights as a horror writer. And I'm a horror writer who occasionally moonlights as a comic book writer. I love comics. I love the storytelling possibilities. You can do things in comics that you can't do in prose and you can't do in film. It's the perfect marriage of the two. But I got to be honest, you know, the comics business, if you love comics, you probably don't want to be in the business of making them for too long. It will break your heart.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of any other business that is continually, even to this day, taking advantage of their creators the way comics publishing has. And it's heartbreaking to see. You know, I won't name names. I'm not going to put anybody on blast. I do see them taking steps to do better. But you know, there's a long legacy, a long history there of not doing right by their creators. And some of it I've seen for myself, experienced for myself. But you know, you're given a chance to work on Doom Patrol or Thor or Luke Cage, you know, these characters you grew up reading. It's really hard not to say, no, you know.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I made a comment, totally different industry, about boxing back in the day when Don King was the one who you went to for the contracts. And
yeah,
people would complain later about having not made this money. I'm like, yeah, but you know you wanted to box. You know he had a deal for you that you could not turn away.
You knew you wanted to box, and you knew you were dealing with Don King. I mean,
right. You know, you knew the money was going to be good. You may not get a ton, as much as you should have gotten, but you knew your name was going to be in everybody's mouth. That's not to say that it should have been done, of course, but there's some things that are, you know, what's the Godfather line? What's the Godfather line? Oh my God. Okay, we all know this line. What's the Godfather line? Something you can't. When
I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
No, not that one. That's a good one too, but not that one. The one where it's like you can't. Oh, it's something about an offer you can't. No. An offer you can't refuse, or
I'll make you an offer you can't refuse.
Now that's the weakest of the three we just brought up. That was the weakest of the three, but still, that's kind of where you can't refuse some stuff. I mean, you know, you
can't. You can't. I've gotten to the point actually where I have started to refuse comics work.
Wow.
Just because, and it's not anything personal. It's just because I don't have time to take it on right now. I am working on a comic right now. I'm very limited in what I can say about it. I can say that it's a 100-page graphic novel. So it's not like sitting down and writing a little 22-page comic book. And it involves worlds and characters and intellectual property created by Stephen King and Richard Chizmar.
Ooh.
So it's not like I can just sit down and make up whatever I want. 4 months of the project were just me going and rereading books and
Oh, wow.
connecting dots and figuring out what to do with it. But working on that, I've turned down some stuff for some of the bigger comic publishers, and it's like, I always wanted to write that character. I might not ever get a chance again, but I'm okay with it. I'm at peace with it,
No, you see, and the thing about it is you're in a place where you can do that now, but it's 25 years in the making. None of that was happening day one.
Exactly.
And it's beautiful to be to this point. The work is what's important. Like you said at the beginning, the work ethic that you have is how you got to this stage where you have to say no to some projects and in lieu of doing something bigger. So
right. Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, and it wasn't the Hulk, but I'm going to use Hulk as an example because he's one of my favorites. I can write a Hulk story amongst the bazillion other Hulk stories.
Yeah.
Or I can play in, Stephen King and Richard Chizmar's world, which not a lot of people have gotten to do. I'm a horror fan. I'm going with that.
Exactly. No, of course. So, okay, the film stuff though, like Ghoul was optioned for a movie on Chiller, and this other one, the one that I did watch was The Fast Zombie Suck. I did watch that, and I was rolling. It was great. I loved it. It was awesome. But like, how did you get into that? Like, what made you? Someone knocked on your door and said, "Hey, I want to try this. Let's make this."
Yeah, I mean, I fell into it by accident. I tell folks. In fact, it's funny. There's 2 young authors I work with. One of them will be embarrassed if I mention him on the air, so I'll only mention the other one. Wiley Young, he's a young author. His second novel came out last year, and it's called The Magpie Coffin, and it made a huge splash. It's up for awards, a lot of accolades, and he recently got some television interest, and he was all freaked out. And I'm like, no, this happens. I don't care who you can write the biggest piece of crap in the world. If you stick with it long enough, someone from Hollywood will come knocking. It's you just got to be patient, that doesn't mean that they're going to turn it into a movie. I've had 1, 2, 3, 4 actual adaptations of my stuff. Meaning, they made it to the screen. But I've optioned out probably 30 of my books and stories.
Holy cow.
So for every option you get, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to make it.
Right.
I point to my buddy Weston Oakes. There was big news several years ago that The Rock had optioned his novel SEAL Team 666. That was like 5 or 6 years ago. Nothing since then. You see The Rock making all kinds of other movies. Nothing was SEAL Team 666. An option is just that. It's somebody says, hey, I'd like to secure the rights to maybe turn this into a movie or a TV show one day. And they hand you a nice little check and you put it in the bank and you go on about your business. You can't get excited until they actually start principal photography.
Definitely true, but it is kind of cool. That.
I'm not going to front. Ghoul come out and it was at Sundance, and I got to take Mary and myself and a bunch of my other friends to Sundance for a weekend. I'm a writer. You're a writer. We know we don't have any money.
Right.
We'll never be able to afford to do that. So, if Ghoul had bombed, I wouldn't have cared. I got to take my girl and my friends to Sundance for a week.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm telling you, when I hear this kind of stuff, I'm like, that's cool. Because like you said, we don't, this is not, we don't play in that pond.
It was such a wild weekend. We're there and, I got to meet Ice-T, my favorite rapper of all time.
How cool.
Got to meet, we saw the guy who played Hank in Breaking Bad. He was at the coffee in line at the coffee shop in front of us.
Oh my gosh.
How often do you get to do something like that?
Right.
So,
I mean, that's awesome. I'm glad you did mention the comment about how, optioning doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go somewhere. But, for anybody that's new and listening, I just want to make sure that,
well, and, sometimes here's a truth that doesn't get told. But it's me, so I'm gonna tell it. Sometimes you don't want the movie. to get made because the
Hmm.
options can be so lucrative. And another mutual friend of ours, F. Paul Wilson,
Hmm.
he had a novel optioned back in the late 70s, I believe it was late 70s. It's never gotten filmed. It's always in development. John Cusack's been attached to it. A number of other actors have been attached to it. It never gets filmed, but every year he gets the option renewed. So every year he's getting X amount of dollars. If they film the movie now, that gravy train would end.
True.
That's
True.
been bankable income every year for decades.
It's
Um,
true.
so yeah, sometimes you're like, yeah, you keep optioning.
You don't want it this year, keep moving, that's fine. So I mean, you're talking a little bit, you said a little bit about, how you're 15 years ago, or 15 took you 15 years to start being able to like not do a day job.
Well,
And
I've been doing it about 15 years. I tried to go full time with the publication of my third novel.
okay.
And I failed miserably at it. I made it about 4 months, and there weren't any royalty checks coming in, and this won't work. So
Mm,
I went back to work. I got a part-time job on the loading docks, and then that was beating me up too much to write. So I got a part-time job at a supermarket working in the produce department, and I
mm,
kept that up until, what was it? I guess Dead Sea, which was my fifth or sixth novel, around the time that came out. At that point, I had enough regular royalties rolling in that I was able to go full time. And that's I understand how, again, I can't stress enough. I understand how rare and how privileged I am. But I would also point out it's not always easy doing that. There's no 401k. There's no health insurance. I that accident I had a couple years ago, I had third-degree burns all down here. I had second-degree burns up here. No health insurance. I'm laying there in the emergency room and they're working on me. And the only thing I'm thinking, in shock, I'm thinking, how the hell am I going to pay for this?
mm,
Um, Luckily, our community come together and there was a GoFundMe, and I was able to pay for it. And there were other folks who offered to help. Stephen King's charity, the Haven Foundation, that
mhm.
him and his wife Tabitha started, they offered to help. Fortunately, I didn't need to call on them. Keith Giffen, one of my favorite comic book creators, one of my favorite people, he called me in the burn ward.
Wow.
He's like, "What's this GoFundMe? I've got Rocket Raccoon money. How much do you need?"
That's awesome.
and luckily, I didn't need to ask him for that either. Our community come together. But
Mm,
if you're doing this full time and you don't have a partner who has a job that supplies those things,
mhm.
you need to be aware of that, particularly if you're young and going full time as a writer. Because when I went full time, I was late 30s, early 40s. Health insurance, who needs that?
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you, at 53, I need health insurance.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
there's no job security. Kindle could go down tomorrow, and there goes half your monthly royalties.
Yeah.
Your publisher may decide, yeah, horror's not in anymore. If you want to write romances, we'll still publish it. There's no job security, but it's a fun job. Um, I think I'm good at it. Even if I'm not good at it, I'm having a blast, and I'm able to give back to something that has given me a lot throughout my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That slides right into the scares that care thing. I don't know how you just did that, but let's talk a little bit. I'm
I can't see your notes.
like, that was the last thing I was going to talk about, but I'm like, this is perfect right here. So, scares that cares, tell us about it.
Yeah, it's a 501c3 charity, meaning we're fully accredited with the IRS and everything. It was founded by Joe Ripple. Joe is a retired detective from Baltimore, and he's also a horror fan. He used to make some indie films, and I knew Joe. I used to be involved with a Baltimore-based horror convention called Horrifying. This was way back in the day when the internet came to you on an AOL CD-ROM.
Yes, yes,
You know,
yes. Oh my
Google
God, stop, because I know this stuff.
yeah, Google, for you kids out there, there was no Google. So
Please.
Horrifind was the search engine you went to when you wanted to look up horror stuff. But Joe always ran security at our conventions. And a few years later, he founded this charity, and he asked me, he said, you've got a lot of celebrity pull. Would you like to get involved? And I said, man, this is exactly what I've been looking to do. I want to use my powers for good. Maybe the internet will be nice to me if I do. Yes, please sign me up. And our mission's real simple. We're composed of horror fans and horror professionals, and every year we pick at least 3 people. Always a kid with cancer, a woman with breast cancer, and a burn victim. And we raise a minimum of $10,000 each for them. They can do whatever they want with the money. If they want to pay down the medical costs, if they want to buy food for their family, whatever will help them best. That's what they can use it on. We don't publicize it as much, but we help out other people too. People here and there are in situations, here's $500, here's $700. But yeah, it's grown. I think this is our 6th year doing the convention, 6th or 7th year doing the convention, which is one of the ways we raise money. But we do other fundraisers throughout the year, and we experiment. We have a 5K run, which raises money for the charity. We tried a crab feast that didn't go over so well. So, we experiment. Because of course, the situation in 2020, we had to do an online fundraiser, and wasn't sure how that would go, but we ended up raising, more than what we needed for the family. So it put us in a good position for this year to start off. But yeah, it's personally very rewarding. I'm sorry, I don't mean to get choked up, but when you meet these folks firsthand and you hear their stories, it's better than any 5-star book review, any nice comment somebody gives you on your comic book. This is what matters, and the fact that I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I can give to the charity and I can help them achieve those goals every year. I could stop writing tomorrow. I'd still do that.
No, that's wonderful. And this is just a side of it's not, you're not doing it for recognition or anything. It's just you doing something that comes from the heart.
Yeah, no, really in fact, Joe and I argue every year, him and some of the other board of directors, they want me to, they think, well, you should sit down and sign autographs because all your peers are signing books and making money. You're not making money at these things. I'm not here to make money. I'm on the board of directors, same as you are. I'm not Brian Keene, the writer for that weekend. I'm Brian Keene on the board of directors. And, now if you excuse me, I got to get Barbara Crampton to her Q&A.
Right. Nice. That's awesome. Really, really nice. So I want to talk about something you did seem to do for yourself, not for recognition necessarily, but for the cathartic nature. End of the Road.
Oh, yes.
It started off, of course, as like, what were they, just posts that you were putting up along the way on the road, like as you were going, but then you consolidated them into the book. And it's a farewell to friends, but it's like nestled in the review of the genre. It was like, I don't know, both of them were so important and so necessary and immensely personal. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's this weird hybrid memoir. I had gone through the death of Jesus Gonzalez, who we talked about earlier, as well as Tom Piccirilli, another author, another really close friend. And as we said, I was not handling those things well. So I wrote The Complex and I wrote Pressure, and they were both coming out the same month, same year. And, I used to always do these cross-country nationwide book signing tours. And I hadn't done one in about 8 years because I'd had another child. And
Mhm.
I thought, well, man, I'm going to need to go out and do one. And mortality was on my mind. I mean, I just lost two of my best friends to cancer. And, I don't have the most wholesome lifestyle in the world.
We're writers. That's like not.
Yeah, mortality was on my mind. And at the same time, a lot of people had been saying, oh, you should do like Stephen King did with Danse Macabre. You
Yeah.
should write a modern day version, the history of modern horror fiction. And I started out with those two ideas, and I planned out my book tour, and the publisher gave me X amount of dollars for the book tour, and I still needed about 10 grand. So I reached out to Rich Chismar at Cemetery Ants, and I knew he was looking for content for the website that would keep people coming in every week. I said, I'll tell you what, you give me the other 10 grand for this book tour, and I'll write you a series of weekly columns, and you can publish it in hardcover when I'm done. He's like, all right, that's easy. That's a deal.
Bet.
And, it started out, it was supposed to be just that, a chronicle of the tour and a history of modern horror fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Halfway through the memoir, it turns into, me finally working out this grieving process over my friends.
Yeah.
I'm happier with it than anything I've ever done.
Oh, wow.
It's the one thing of mine that I hope 25, 50 years after I'm gone, people may still pick up and read. Maybe this sounds arrogant to say it. I don't mean it to come across that way, but I think the book has value. I think it has merit. I think even if you hate my guts, if you want to understand the changes in publishing over the last 25 years, the changes in the genre over the last 25 years, it's all right there. It's a handbook of what changed and how we adapt to it and how to make a living doing this, and how to have fun doing it,
Yeah.
Luckily I didn't die, so it's not so much of a farewell, but it's funny. I gave it to my oldest son. As I said, he's 30, and it was in the early stages of last year when we didn't really have an understanding at all of this pandemic, and it really felt like The Walking Dead was creeping in on us. And
yes.
I went over to my oldest son's house. I had my mask on. He had his mask on. He works in healthcare, so I've seen him exactly twice in the last year, even though he lives 20 minutes away.
Oh.
But I said, look, I know you read comic books, graphic novels. You don't read your dad's stuff, but here's a copy of this. This is who your old man was, and he read it actually. And he said it definitely gave him a deeper understanding of his old man. So for that reason alone,
wow,
I'm glad the book exists,
Oh, yeah. I loved your honesty in it. I mean, the changes in the industry, it's one thing to just hear, oh, the industry changes, did blah, blah, blah. It sounds like, you're reading an article, but you really dove in and made it clear how it impacts you or any writer at that time, and how the landscape is so different now. So that if you, like someone like, you were more active than me consistently, me leaving and coming back, I looked around, I was like, what happened? It was 2016 when I came back, and I was like, this is not the spot that I left.
Completely different world.
Completely different. And so your honesty there, I was nodding all the way through, because it was like, yeah, I remember what it used to be like that. It is not like that anymore. And what is Goodreads? I mean, like, I literally was like, I don't even understand what this is. Like, what? Don't you just put reviews on the bookstore site? What is this? I don't know what this is.
I'm getting to the point where I don't understand. I can't keep up with it all.
Oh, it's too much.
Like
we had that conversation. I hate.
I was like, I'm not going to get on YouTube. The heck with that. I'm a writer. I don't need to be. And my 13-year-old is like, no, Dad, if you want to reach people my age, you've got to be on YouTube. You know what? He was absolutely right. I look at my viewers on there, and they're all Generation Z, and they're all discovering my books for the first time. Maybe they're borrowing them from their parents, or maybe they're buying them. I hope they're not pirating them,
Oh God,
you know,
that's right. We weren't even thinking about that back then.
but they're finding me through YouTube. So it's tough to keep up, and it seems to be still changing so fast. It's like, like the universe keeps expanding. This industry keeps expanding with technology, but if you're going to do this for a living, you have to try to keep up.
You definitely do. And you have to go the social media route. You have to. I was told by a young person, very young person, to get on TikTok. And I was like, and I still haven't done it yet, but I'm like, no, there's some author network thing on TikTok that I probably need to pay attention to. And I'm just like, so it's TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And of course, that kid looked at me like, what's Facebook? And I'm like, stop it. I won't continue this conversation if you do that.
Well, and what I always tell people, even if you're not going to use them, it makes sense to go there and claim your name so that there's not, a fake Brian Keene account. I mean, I'm the most far away from far right person you'll ever meet. Okay, but that one far right social media thing, what's with the frog? What's it called? Gab. When they first launched that, I went there. I held my nose. I did it like this, but I went there, registered Brian Keene, sent one message so it could show I used it, and I've never logged back in again. I don't even know what my login is, but you want to claim that real estate so that somebody doesn't do it, because that happens all the time. My friend Casey Lansdale, really super talented actress, country and western singer. Somebody took over her Twitter.
Oh no!
As Casey Lansdale, and she can't get back into it. So now there's somebody posting links to like anime and stuff, and
oh my gosh,
we struggle enough. We spend our day writing, and then we've got to find the time to go on social media and market ourselves and do all this. The last thing you want is for some troll, some nut to be on there pretending to be you.
Right.
So, I will probably never use Twitch, but I claim my real estate there. There any new social media app that comes up, I go and register. That way nobody else can register as me. And it's not something that I think most writers ever think of, but I think it's something to do. It takes you, 30 seconds and then you're done.
No, that's good advice. That's good advice. I definitely, because I'm like, I don't like social media. I don't have anything to say, I find. But then again, I mean, which is funny because if you talk to me in person, no one would ever walk away and say, oh, well, Marie Wood has nothing to say. I mean, that's not going to be connected to me at all. But on social media, I literally can't keep up the conversation so much.
I can't either. I miss the days, and we're both going to sound old here. I miss the days of message boards. I had a message board with about 5,000 users, and it was other authors and myself. And I would give other authors like their own form on there. Like Maurice Broaddus had one, and Weston Oaks had one, and it was great. It was real one-on-one interaction. Nobody was arguing with each other. Those days are long gone. Social media is necessary. It's like Amazon. We can debate the pros and cons of Amazon all night long. And I'm not an economist, so I'm probably not the best person to do that. I recognize the damage Amazon puts into the world, but at the same time, we got to use Amazon.
Yeah.
I myself am guilty of it. Well, I can get in the car and drive 45 minutes to the nearest bookstore, or I can buy it on Amazon.
Yeah.
Social media is the same way. I do think it's harmful. I think it is changing not just the way we have conversations. I think it's changing the fundamental moral structure of the world. And yet,
you have to use it.
What's the alternative? I know of one author that doesn't use social media, Bentley Little. And Bentley Little made his name before there was social media, so he went away with it,
Right. No, and that's the shame of it all. I mean, you just mentioned it. So now you just reminded me when you said driving to the bookstore. I'm going to show our picture. Pardon me, because That's what I think of when I think about, oh, a new piece is coming out. I'm going to sign it at the bookstore at a table full of people, and the people are going to come in and talk to me. And the conversations were so magnificent. You
Yes.
touched upon that in your end of the road book too. I mean, it's great. Doesn't matter if there's like a ton of people or just a couple. It's just the discussions that you can get into. I always loved it, like when it ended up being like a book club meeting in the end, because everyone who was standing there was trying to get their copy signed. So we ended up talking about the book, and I'm like, I live for that. But it's different now. That, and I'm gonna share this while we talk. But the Amazon doesn't provide that, and especially with here we are. Can you see it?
Oh yes,
Here
there
we
it
are.
What was that, about 2004, I think.
Yep. Here's
And
Brian, and here's little old me.
there's little you. There's Jesus. There's Mary.
Isn't
Wow.
it great? It's crazy.
Wow.
Seriously. That's just, and when what's great, I want everyone to know is that I mentioned that I didn't keep a lot of this old stuff, and I hate to say old, but it's true. I didn't keep this stuff, and I really wished I had. And then Brian reached out to me one day with the picture. The picture's the first thing I saw. I was like, whoa, where did you even get this?
Yeah, I'd been, because I told you off the air, I save everything, every cocktail napkin, everything. And my youngest son is showing an interest in all this. So he and I have been going through my archives, and I would pull things out like that. I'm like, you know what? I need to hang this on the wall. So I framed, I don't know how many old flyers and stuff like that. And now they're all just hanging up in the office. I mean, it's pretty cool. There are moments, sitting there working, and you stop and you lean back and you look around and you're like, yeah, I did this.
Yeah.
It's been a good ride,
Those were the days, I mean, I didn't go across country like you did. But I went as often as I could go to these signings, and you meet fellow authors who are just grinding like you are, because I mean, all this is great and everything. And you have, whatever success level we're talking about, you and I are sitting here talking like we did then. This is because we're both writers. This is what we do. These conventions we go to, or before the situation, right? The current situation.
Right.
We would go to these and we'd sit and everyone would talk, and, just either it's about horror, but it doesn't have to be about their work specifically. It's just about the genre in general, or about something they saw or read. It's a fantastic community. I mean, I've always felt at home in it.
And you don't get it on social media. You really don't. I mean, I know there's groups and there's chats, but it's not the same. And for people who have never experienced that in-person communion, and I don't mean to make it sound like church, but it feels like church.
It does.
You go to like the event that you just showed, and I know we both left there that day, and we went home and we were writing.
Oh yeah, all night. Because you're totally pumped after having sat around with people that do what you do, and it's the energy.
Yep.
I mean, I remember the first time I was at what I think it was, I don't know, I was manning the table at the Mid-Atlantic. It was a Mid-Atlantic table at something, doggone it. I think it was Horrifying, the Horrifying convention, but I can't remember the year.
Yeah.
And the guy who played, what the words are escaping me tonight, Brian. The guy who played
The Godfather.
No. Terminator, not Terminator. No, that'd be Arnold Schwarzenegger. No, the guy who played, oh, come on. He fights him and he's an alien.
Predator.
Thank you. I'm like, this is ridiculous. The guy who played Predator was walking by, but he had he was walking by with the whole getup on.
Right.
And I remember, because he's really tall. I don't know if you were there for this one.
Oh, yeah.
He walked by our table, and I was just sitting there like, dude, that's the Predator. But I'm like, wait, that's the real Predator. That's not a costume.
Yeah.
That's the real one. And I'm like, those moments, if you've never gone to a convention, you don't know how cool that actually is.
No,
the guy from The Hills Have Eyes, I think it's Michael Berryman.
Michael Berryman, great guy.
I was heading to the restroom. He was standing down there, and I was like, oh my God, and I really don't even want to go in. This is an actor, like, chill. It's not for real.
and he's the sweetest guy. He writes poetry.
Yep.
He raises, he runs a shelter for injured wolves.
Oh my goodness.
The guy from Hills Have. I always tell folks, my favorite moment, and again, you would not get this online on social media. The New York Times did a big 2-page spread on, horror's big comeback, horror fiction's big comeback. And they featured myself, Jeff Gonzalez, Tim Levin.
Mhm.
And that issue came out while I was at a horror convention in Arizona. And, we managed to snag a copy of the New York Times. It was Michael Berryman who brought it upstairs. We were all just chilling in the after hours green room.
Yeah.
And they all took turns reading it to me. And it was Reggie Bannister from the Phantasm films, Michael Berryman, George Romero, my buddy Tom Piccirilli, myself, a buddy of mine, Todd Clark, who's not a writer, but just a longtime friend. You can't recapture something like that on Facebook Live or on Twitter.
No.
It's a moment. I could be in the Alzheimer's ward, and I may not remember who Mary is, but I will remember that moment.
You better watch her. Shh, don't say that so loud.
No, she's not home.
Oh. Like, what are you doing?
I remember you, baby. If you're watching this later, I remember you.
Oh my God. Oh, no, it's true. These things are you can't recreate it. We try. We have to do what we can, right? But yeah. I can't wait to be able to go back to these things and see just those moments that you're just kind of like, was that? Or, having a conversation, you're like, I can't believe I just discussed that with, it's just great stuff. But the energy that I've always felt, being in a room with writers who are actively writing and not just thinking about doing it one day. Right. It's so invigorating, really. I don't know what I have not looked at the time. I see now, and I don't recall when we started, but I do want to ask you one more thing.
Absolutely.
What's the scariest book you think you've ever written?
One that I've written?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
That's a hard one.
See, it depends, because what scares you might not necessarily scare me.
Sure.
Can I do top 3?
All right.
I mean, if we're talking about fears that speak to me personally, I would say Ghoul, Dark Hollow, and probably The Complex.
I was gonna say it better be on that list. The Complex is raw. I mean, I'm just saying. I told you I had to stop listening.
I know.
I was like, look, come on. And I kept talking to my phone because playing the book, and I'm like, didn't have to be that way. Did not have to do that. I'm sorry.
That I had gotten divorced, and I was living in a complex like the Complex. Every one of those characters were my real neighbors around me, but I didn't know any of them.
Well, that's awesome.
Obviously, the one character is the burned out horror writer who ends up using one of his Stoker awards to dig through the wall. Hi.
When he did that, I was like, that's hilarious. I'm just going to keep going.
I didn't know any of these people around me. So I started making up their stories based around. And then I did get to know them. And some of them I got right, and some of them I did not get right. But
I like Stephanie in that book. She's my favorite.
I like Stephanie. I'll tell you, I was nervous about Stephanie. Stephanie is a trans character, writing from her point of view. It's certainly not the first time I've done that as a writer. However, times have changed, and I'm very aware that, you have to really think about that perspective when you do that, which I didn't do when I was younger. As I said at the beginning, we change, we grow as people.
Right.
And I was really nervous about my depiction of Stephanie, but I gave it to several trans friends, and I said, "Be honest." And every one of them like, "You nailed it. Are you sure you're not trans?"
No, see, it felt authentic.
So I felt a lot better about it after that.
Yeah, no, there's so many scenes in there that I really love, but she felt really authentic. She really did. I mean,
I loved her as a character. The other character in that, the Vietnam vet, the black guy, that was based real life. My father's best friend in Vietnam, he and that guy were the only two that made it home. And then they got stuck on riot duty after they were still serving. And that actually happened to his buddy. They were on riot duty, and he got called an Uncle Tom. He got spit on. It messed him up worse than anything he ever saw over there in the jungle.
Yeah.
And I never got to meet him. But my dad told me that story many times over the years. It was important to him that somebody know his buddy's story. And I thought, well, what better way to memorialize his friend than to use that, and maybe it'll touch somebody. Maybe somebody will learn from it. Think about it, So
oh, it's very interesting, and now you're speaking to my shirt. It's true though. No, I love how you took that real life story, but that's how we write though. You get the way to get a character to feel real has always been to pull from real life.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, so you heard that story over and over a perfect way. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yep.
I know, I love that one. I don't know what that says about me, but I love the complex.
They're three of my most personal novels. They're three that I think are the scariest, and they're three of my most personal. So I don't know, make of that what you will. I'm not a psychiatrist, but
no, you're not diving into that yet, at least. Awesome. Well, okay, so you mentioned you are working on one thing. Is there anything else you can tell us about what's coming up?
I'm working on the graphic novel. Coming out next, there's a vampire novel called With Teeth that I'm really proud of. That should be out next month. And the paperback and Kindle editions of Suburban Gothic by myself and Brian Smith should be out soon. And let's see what else. Yeah, so those two are like out next. And then right now I'm working on that graphic novel that I mentioned, and I'm working on a Western novel. No horror at all, just a straight Western novel.
A Western, huh?
Here's the thing. My grandma, she's 95 years old, and she's a voracious reader. And I'm here to tell you, she's not going anywhere. Her mother lived to 100. She'll outlive me. But, she's a voracious reader, but she only reads Westerns. And, 25 years, she's been asking me, when are you going to write something I can read?
Oh, that's awesome.
And the Western market right now, they're desperate for writers, because, not to put too fine a point on it, but most of their writers are very old or very dead. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever read a Western before. I've watched them on television, but I don't think I've ever read one.
Yeah, I mean, if folks listening and watching to this, if you have a passion for Westerns, don't just sit down and say, well, I want to get published, so I'm going to write a Western, because that's not the way to do it. You'll fail. But if you understand Westerns and you have a passion for them, there's a market for them right now. There's a huge market. People aren't talking about it.
Right.
But yeah, there's a huge market for Westerns right now. So,
well, you heard it first.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, honestly,
this was fun.
It's been a long time since we've just sat down and had a conversation like this.
Exactly.
It was very cool though. I laughed almost as much as I thought I would. I'm glad that, I laughed as much as I thought I would, but I thought I was going to fog my glasses up, and that only happened once. So at least I was able to recover. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
I love you. Take care. And when this mess is over, let's do this in person.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
No doubt. I don't do this finger thing well. See, it looks like
I don't either.
Scratch somebody.
I didn't know what it was. Mary had to teach me that. I didn't know what that was.
But it's better on this side for me.
She taught me how to do this. She taught me how to eat with a fork and a spoon. She's taught me a lot of things. See, I'm doing damage control.
I don't know. I don't know if it's gonna work. I just don't know if it's gonna work.
It'll work.
You could just ask Jim to edit that out.
Oh no, leave it in there, Jim. Leave it in there, Jim. All right.
Look, Mary, I had nothing to do with this. Okay, watch the tape. Watch the tape. He just went off on his own. Oh my gosh.
All right, take care, y'all.
Take care. Thank you.